Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone online. Hopefully we're avoiding some snow out there. And I will call the meeting to order. I only have regrets so far from Leanne Mallett. Claudine, I don't know if you got any other regrets.
Yeah, Andrew Mystery as well.
Okay. And we will now go to the acknowledgement of our traditional territories.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
So our first item here is I need a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee approves the agenda for February 18th, 2024. I'm going to try and see who I see. Yes. Sorry, I can't see.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Mark? And did I see someone else there?
Anyone second it?
Yeah, me myself, Trustee Benjamin.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
There we go.
All right. All in favor? Or actually, first, are there any discussions? Anything to add? Anything missing? Give a few seconds for that. I don't see anyone. Okay, and then all in favor? I see 1, 2, 3. All right.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Are there any conflicts of interest? Please use the raise your hand or just speak out for me if there's any conflicts of interest. Seeing no one, continue on. So next on the list is approval of the minutes from January 21st, 2025. Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee approves the meeting minutes from January 21st, 2025? All right.
Happy to put that out.
I see Barb.
Yeah, Dorothy was the first.
And Dorothy, okay, thank you. Somebody's better at seeing this than I am. Too much going on my screen.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Are there any discussions regarding the minutes tonight? Any omissions, comments? Nothing? Seeing nothing, I'll ask, is everyone all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Perfect, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks. All right, carried. Delegations and public questions. There are no delegations or public questions this evening. Our reports from officials and staff. So first up, we have the superintendent's report. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Knight. Good evening and welcome to all SEAC members. I want to thank everyone, firstly, for your flexibility as we moved our meeting to virtual this evening. We always want to ensure the safety and well-being of all SEAC members and of the PDSB staff. As well, a huge thank you to everyone who was able to make the interim SEAC meeting to discuss program changes and provide input. Your participation and engagement are invaluable as we continue to build strong foundations for communication and partnership. It's through that input and collaboration that we can achieve our shared goals, and I'm excited to see what we can accomplish as we move forward. I'm pleased to share that we have begun to share these program changes with administrators, and they have been extremely well received. As a next step, we will be communicating, as you requested, all of these changes transparently and clearly to families and students. More details will follow in the report. I am thrilled to share that our partnership with the Ministry of Labor and Imagine Consultations led by Ryan Machette recently won the Performance Excellence Award at Employment Ontario Employment Summit. This partnership focuses on supporting youth with disabilities in our community to find employment success in collaboration with the Peel network of service providers. Next week, I will be meeting with the Ministry of Labor to see how we can expand our partnership and give even more students opportunities for workplace placements. I also want to highlight a story about how one of our CRTs are making a difference one story at a time. A principal from a PDSB middle school recently reached out to a CRT to ask for support of a student who was not reaching his full communication potential. This story shared is from the CRT's perspective. I was so pleased when I received the call from the school principal. I started by looking through the student's SEA IT information and IEP, and I found that he had access to iGaze system that he had not fully worked with yet. I quickly located the iGaze system and worked with the school for hours, trying my best to understand the technology and how it could be used to support this amazing student. Once I had a good grasp on how the tool functioned, I sat down with the education assistant and we began our training. Over a few long days spent together with the iGaze system, we developed basic communication boards in collaboration with our speech and language pathologists and explored the training activities for the student. The first few days of iGaze were difficult for the student as he was training his head and eyes to maintain focus to work with the technology. Frustration was presented as exhaustion, and similar to any athlete training for a big event, he pulled through. But with solid teamwork between myself, the amazing resilience of the student and the EA, we made progress. Simple yes/no replies were accompanied by smiles by everyone. Every time I checked in with both of them, I was met with, can we add more to this communication board? And I was happy that the EA shared videos of him using iGaze. Once the student's board began to evolve to more specific detailed words and phrases, his personality began to surface. What we learned was that he was charming and loves the attention of staff. He quickly became popular with the office and the administration with daily check-ins and conversations about the events in his weekend. This then worked its way into the classroom where the student began to engage in classroom discussions and lessons with his peers. By the third month of him using the iGaze, he was able to fully present to his class via his iGaze system and with Google Slides. What I learned was that the student had always been communicating, but he had limited access to the tools where he could share phrases and expressions, his thoughts and feelings. But with the iGaze and the amazing dedication of his EA and his resilience and dedication, he is now fully able to express and represent his true self. Stories like these remind us every day that a child deserves a champion, someone who cares deeply about their success and unlocking their potential, and will learn more and do better in service of students. I'm now pleased to provide an update to the PDSB Accessibility Plan. Since our last update, we have engaged the working group members to review accessibility standards and reevaluate current barriers and gaps to achieving accessibilities. Each member of the working group is meeting with Candace Natemint, the Manager of Abilities and Wellness, individually through January and February to check their department progress. A revised draft of the multi-year action plan will be completed in early March and shared with SEAC in April. As requested at a former meeting, I am sharing the summary of outcomes from the 2024 Equity Report Card with a focus on special education. This Equity Report Card was conducted by the PDSB research team, and the following are a summary of the outcomes. Students who identify as Indigenous, African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean and white are the most likely to be identified with an exceptionality. African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students are more than 2 times more likely to be identified with a language impairment or mild intellectual disability, and almost 2 times more likely to be identified with a learning disability. Indigenous students are 3 or more times more likely to be identified with the following exceptionalities: autism, language impairment, learning disability, and mild intellectual disability. White students are overrepresented in students identified with autism and learning disabilities. Students identified as gender diverse and are overrepresented in almost all exceptionalities. Students who are identified as diverse gender are more than 2.5 times more likely to be identified with learning disability exceptionalities and mild intellectual disabilities. Students identifying as 2S/LGBTQA+ are overrepresented in mild intellectual disabilities and learning disabilities. Students experiencing higher economic need are more likely to be identified with an exceptionality. With language impairments, mild intellectual disabilities, unlike students with less economic vulnerabilities. East Asian and students who experience lower economic need are overrepresented in students who identified as gifted. There is representation for students who have an IEP without formal identification or receive services without an IEP. Indigenous, African, Black, Afro-Caribbean, Latinx, Hispanic, white, gender diverse, and 2S LGBTQA+ are overrepresented in these services. As a department, we are deeply committed to considering all of the outcomes of this work and continuing to dismantle racist, oppressive, and ableist practices across the board. One of the most important ways we are taking action on this is through our collaborative student review meetings, where we collectively assess and reflect on our practices and center the voices of students and families in our decision-making. Alongside of this, we are prioritizing professional learning and maintaining an ongoing commitment to have the necessary conversation that allow us to grow, challenge, and improve. It is through these efforts that we will ensure our work is truly inclusive and equitable for all. Finally, I would like to share some news. With more than 30 years in public education, including 4 at the Peel District School Board, Associate Director of Education, Dr. Camille Logan, will be retiring at the start of April. Since joining the PDSB in the spring of 2021, Dr. Logan has led several portfolios, including curriculum, instruction and assessment, equity, inclusive education, community engagement, special education, and safety and well-being. Her leadership has been instrumental in advancing transformative initiatives, notably the anti-racism policy and the Affirming Muslim Students with Dismantling Islamophobia strategy, notable firsts for our board led by Dr. Logan. Her leadership contributions also include revising the system-wide school improvement and equity planning process, developing the Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA+ action plan, and We Rise Together 2.0 Black Student Success Strategy. Dr. Logan further guided the establishment of the Center for Indigenous Excellence and the Center for Black Excellence, laying the groundwork for inclusive representation and belonging for PDSB students and families. Dr. Logan leaves behind a legacy of transformative change and an unwavering commitment to equity and student success. As somebody who has had the great pleasure of working alongside of Dr. Logan, I can only tell you the amount of influence and change she has had. As she embarks on this next chapter, we extend our deepest gratitude for her many, many contributions and congratulate her on a remarkable career, and we wish her all the very best. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, congratulations on your retirement. And do we have any questions? I see a hand here. Lucas, here looks like you're number 1. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? I've got my AirPods connected here. I think first and foremost, a warm and hearty congratulations to Dr. Logan. I know that we will most certainly miss all of your wonderful contributions. So sincerely, Dr. Logan, thank you on behalf of myself, and if I can be so brave, my colleagues as well. And now for my question. Thank you. And through you, Chair, my question was regarding some of this data when we're talking about overrepresentations. I'm just wondering if we can learn what the benchmarks were as they relate to all of the respected areas where we might see over or under representation. I'm just trying to learn a bit more about what the benchmark is. Thank you.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, I do have Lynn Hollingshead here. Lynn, I'm not sure if you can respond to Trustee Alves' question, please.
Through you, Chair, I'm sorry, would you please repeat your question?
Yes, no problem. Through you, Chair. My question is, when we're talking about the over and under representations as it relates to all of the data points, I'm just wondering what the benchmarks are when we're like what would be the number for lack of a better word, adequately represented, or it's not the right word I'm looking for, but
threshold.
Like what is the threshold? Sorry, and thank you very much, Dr. Hollingshead.
You're welcome. Through you, Chair. It's actually very challenging process to decide on an appropriate threshold. What we have done thus far is really looked at 1.5, and it's just it's not hard fast. It's not a statistical decision. It's really in conversation with community. We had conversation with community in relation to Directive 21 suspensions, and landed on 1.5 there in order to really keep the gaze on the groups of students of concern. So in particular, African, Black, and Afro-Caribbean students and Indigenous students, but not bringing the bar down too low so that it brought in any group, like in particular white students in suspensions. And so that's really been our sort of our rule. As I said, it's not it's not a statistical decision. It's really a decision of how do we help us understand where our work is. If at some point in the future, and I hope this happens in my career time, that we see all the numbers pull down below 1.5, and then we'll move that threshold to something like 1.2. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. I think I might have some follow-ups, but I can save them for outside of committee when I kind of better formulate my thinking around what the data points are in comparison to other boards. But I think that's great. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you very much.
There we go. Jazzy, you are up next.
Yeah, and I apologize if you're repeating Superintendent Zuccato, if you're going to repeat your answer, but my internet cut out there, so I didn't hear much of what Trustee Alves had asked Lynn. But my question was around over and under benchmarks with low vision kids. I don't know if I missed it through my bad internet connection. If you had stated what that was, could you state that again?
No, there was no data collected around low vision students. This was more around cultural representation. So they looked at those identifying factors. But through you, Chair, I can also ask Lynn to fill in if there was any data collected on that.
Thank you, Superintendent Zuccato, and through you, Chair. The challenge is the number of students who are identified with low vision or blind is very small, and so what happens is the data gets suppressed. So when you look at that report, there was a section where we looked at the different exceptionalities by race, let's say, and the groups that were small in numbers. So that one, deaf and hard of hearing, I can never remember if it's speech impairment, I think is another low one. So those get suppressed due to low numbers.
I'm sorry, I just rejoined. I am having horrible internet connection, so I missed, Lynn, I missed all of that. I apologize.
So I'll try again. That's okay. Okay, so through you, Chair, the populations with small numbers in that report got suppressed due to small numbers. There's a section where the graphs show the exceptionalities and looking at who's identified by, for example, race, and the exceptionalities with low numbers are suppressed. So historically and currently, that would be blind and low vision, deaf and hard of hearing, speech impairment, and as of this year, behavioral.
Okay. You know, I find that like that's really unfortunate because I'm learning throughout whenever we have conversations about data, because the numbers are so low that blind, low vision remarks and data are then often suppressed. I don't know if there's a way that we can still track and benchmark and try to exceed and better the programs for blind, low vision, but I feel like if it's constantly suppressed in the different reports because the numbers are so wrong, so small, I'm just wondering, like, how do we then strive to do better and have how do we include these kids in the data if the numbers are always small? I just feel like it's a common issue with whenever we're hearing about numbers and Peel.
Through you, Chair, if you may. The challenge is not so much about suppression for protection of identity, but suppression because the data becomes easily skewed by one student. So if one student ends up in a group of concern, the data will be misrepresentative of the student. So it's a challenge to be using quantitative data to understand experiences of small groups. We really have to do something more in a qualitative nature. Do you need more information?
No, I think I'm good. I think I'd be open to hearing your suggestion about what we can do more. But we can take that offline for another conversation. Yeah.
And Susan Benjamin?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, I just using this opportunity to thank AD Logan for all the work, her leadership, and I wish her all the best for her retirement. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Barb, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment regarding the threshold of 1.5% regarding the identification rate of different exceptionalities. With regards to gifted, they should represent at least 2% of the population. Some research says 2 to 5% of the population. So I would hope that gifted doesn't fall below 1.5%. Which it has actually in the school board, but seems to be coming back up again. Thank you.
Any comments that from the board? Nope. Okay. Thank you for that, Barb. I have a couple of questions. I don't see another raised hand. So regarding the update on the accessibility committee and the accessibility plan, just trying to understand. So the plan was due in December 2024, right? So when we're still, was anything submitted in December?
Through you, Chair. So yeah, the initial plan was, as we shared with you when Candace came to do the presentation, was submitted as is. But now we're really trying to refine based on feedback that we received to more tangible and measurable outcomes. So Candace Namath is in the process of individually meeting with every manager or superintendent on the committee, trying to get more tangible and measurable outcomes to further update and refine the program, which we'll bring back. Though everybody's work is due in March, and we'll bring that back.
Okay, and there has been talk over the years and even this year with you of having SEAC members on that committee. I haven't seen any change in that.
Yes, and through you, Chair, this is this right now, the managers, kind of meeting, the people who are filling out the document and trying to hold accountable. But I can bring that back to Candace again. I'm not sure how she responded last time, so I want to make sure that we're aligned. So I will bring that back. It's something that we can perhaps put on the motion action log, I would like to suggest. So I bring back a more fulsome response.
Okay, thank you. And the equity report cards, so that comes out each year in the fall, correct? That report? There's a report each year. Yeah, I would suggest.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a lot of information for an oral report. I think that should not be an oral report. I think that should be a presentation and how we're progressing year over year and how that's impacting students with special needs, right? So the data that's in there that is specific to students with special needs and how their changes in their measurements are changing. I think it would be helpful to see that each year at SEAC, whether they are changing, they aren't changing, what's being done to progress that. So
through you, Chair, we can certainly take that back for consideration next year. It was a long report, but as promised, I always had a paper copy ready and printed for all of you, but we moved to virtual. That shifted. So I'm happy to send out via Pam my oral report tomorrow. So those of you who would like more time with it can certainly take a look.
Okay. That'd be great. And I think in future, just because we're now in this virtual / hybrid world, if that could be always sent out ahead to everyone, it would be very helpful, even if it's the day of, ideally earlier. But so that even the people online can understand and follow along with what's going on. So if that's something we could move forward with, that would be really appreciated, I think, by many.
Sure, I'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so may I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the superintendent's report? Who do I see? I see Jazzy, and number 2, I see Dorothy. Thank you. Oh, we kind of did that backwards. I apologize. We had the discussion. All in favor? Okay, carried.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Like that. We'll move on to 7.2, special education program changes for 2025-26. And I'll turn that over to you.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair. This will be a recap of the presentation we already shared at our interim meeting, but to honor the fact that all members were there, we wanted to once again share the special education department program changes. And I'm going to ask coordinating principal Jeff Bertrand to share the slide deck. Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Mark, if we can go to the first slide, that would be great. Okay, so to recap for those that weren't there and to just go over it again, the rationale for some of the program changes that we're looking at for next year is really around 3 things: maximizing inclusion for equity, so trying to give students more opportunities to integrate into the school community, to have access to courses, and to have consistent support. A commitment to anti-ableism, and this is really strongly driving our revisioning of our special programs classes, and then addressing operational limitations in terms of funding and staffing constraints that are seen across the province. Next slide, please. So proposed changes. There are changes to both our elementary and secondary communications programs, our special programs classes. There is one change to our Vocational 1 program at this time as we await the final report from the review to go to SEAC next month, and then our KTLC as well. Next slide, please, Mark. Okay, so elementary communication clusters. As we shared at our interim meeting, the model isn't changing, but we are moving from 3 clusters of 8 students at a particular school site to 2. And we're doing that mostly so that the comm teacher now has a third of their day freed up to support students in those 2 clusters in their mainstream classes, or to pull them out to do additional work with them. What we found with the resource teachers that were in place this year in an effort to provide continuity to the program in the absence of teachers is that when they were covering absences, they were not able to provide adequate resource support to the schools they were assigned to. And so this model should provide more consistency, as well as having the comm teacher at the school working with staff and students that they already know and have relationships with. So that is the first change. If we can go to the next one, please. Secondary regional communications. As discussed, we have 3 secondary schools that currently offer a regional comm program. And over the next 5 years, we are going to close the program, take the staffing allocation that is provided to those 3 schools, and redistribute to each secondary school in the system, along with the addition of approximately 5 teachers worth of sections, so that every secondary school in the system is able to provide 2 sections of protected special education staffing that will be used to provide a direct reading instruction program to students in grade 9. So this will increase our ability to provide direct reading instruction to secondary students. Right now, our 3 sites take 8 grade 9s max each year. But if we are able to provide 6 to 8 at all 36 of our secondary schools, that's a significant increase in access, and students no longer need to leave their homeschool community to have direct reading support as needed. If we can go on to the next one, please. Okay, this is the most significant change and affects the most schools of all of them. And that is our special programs classes and the change from an identification or diagnosis-based class to ability-based classes. So we are moving away from classes such as ASD resource or DD special needs to learning hubs. This provides greater flexibility for our central IPRCs in terms of placing kids closer to their home communities. And it gives us more spots in our intermediate and secondary resource programs as we're able to increase the size of programs. The ratio of students to EAs in all of the programs will either remain the same or in one case increase for next year. If we go on to the next one, please, Mark. The model is there for the naming conventions. Sorry. So the number in each of the learning hubs represents the number of students in a given class or program. So I'll just quickly go through them. Learning Hub 6 is a fully self-contained placement and is available to students from grade 2 to age 21, so both elementary and secondary. Learning Hub 8 is an intermediate placement that will be phased out over the next couple of years as we move towards changing those to Learning Hub 6s. Learning Hub 10R and 12R are resource placements. 10R is intermediate and senior, so secondary school and middle school, and 12R is intermediate only. And those would be resource placements, so students would be intentionally integrated into mainstream or regular classes as part of the program. Learning Hub 25 is what is now our enhanced learning class, and Learning Hub 36R is a secondary only resource program where students are timetabled fully into regular classes but have access to a GLE class and a resource room for support throughout the day. As we move away from identification or diagnosis-based IPRC placement decisions, placement considerations will be based on students' communication skills, skills and independence, access to curriculum, whether that's alternative, modified, accommodated, or enhanced, and any environmental considerations. This new structure allows for teaching of skills based on ability groupings and needs of students, and also provides options for every pathway post-secondary. And if we go on to the next slide, Mark. Vocational 1. So as I said, the final report is coming to SEAC shortly, and there are a number of recommendations for the Vocational 1 program, but we're looking to implement one now because we needed to work with planning to ensure that our schools with vocational programming would be staffed appropriately for this change. And with staffing numbers coming out shortly, we needed to put this in place prior to some of the other recommendations that we'll have to review further. So students in Vocational 1 currently have a fully self-contained placement, so they are to be in classes that meet the ministry cap for the full day. We are proposing that students in year 3 or higher would have the option of receiving a partial integration placement, which would mean they need to be timetabled into one regular class throughout the year, and that would allow them access to optional credits at the school that are not offered in the vocational program that align with their strengths and interests, potentially things like dance, drama, visual arts, specific phys ed classes, but it also would give schools with smaller programs the ability to have a student take a 1-credit co-op without having to provide a dedicated vocational co-op staffing. And so therefore saving schools some of their staffing sections to use on other things while still providing an increased access for students in the Vocational 1 program. And this proposed change is really in response to what we heard in the review around parents and students wanting more opportunities to integrate into the school community as a whole, more opportunities to access additional courses and to have additional opportunities in co-op. Okay, and the next one, Mark, is our KTLC. So this is our kindergarten transition learning class, and effective next year, this will no longer continue as a congregated program. The services, support, and learning that have benefited a small group of students, currently about 54 across the system, will now be available to all kindergarten students through a slight change in the way we have our speech language pathologists work with our kindergarten class across the system. So our department, in collaboration with curriculum and the early years, are providing support for Tier 1 and Tier 2 early language instruction in all kindergarten classes. And we're creating additional resources to support educators in kindergarten classes with oral language development. So that is the last of our changes. I believe there's no more slides, Mark. I think that's it. So happy to open it up for questions, comments, feedback. As Claudine mentioned earlier, we are mapping out the communication to parents, IPRC chairs, school-based teams. We've taken into account the feedback from our interim meeting around really highlighting and assuring parents that when there isn't a location change or there isn't a change in the amount of support students are receiving in their class, we're going to highlight that in our communication because we understand that that's really sort of the first thing parents are going to want to know about before we get into the details of the program. So we are incorporating that feedback from our last meeting into all of our communication plans.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Do you have any questions? Lucas Ellis, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give Mr. Bertrand a shout out and thank him again for this presentation. I enjoyed it when we had a working session earlier this month. I thought it was fantastic, and Superintendent Sakata was able to take a lot of our questions that we had regarding process, and I think it was great. And on paper, it certainly looked like a wonderful solution. So just really wanted to underscore that and thank them for that work. No formal question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Barb, looks like you're up next. You're on mute, Barb.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because I'll go last if they do.
Waiting. Anyone else? Lucas, you're still having
Ray has a question.
Ray has his hand up. Yeah.
Oh, I can't see him. Go ahead.
Oh, he's taken his hand. Okay.
Hand is down now. I cannot see him. Okay. All right. I guess it's up to you, Barb. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion regarding this presentation. So whereas staff have made significant changes to the special education services and classes in the 2024 to 2025 school year without sharing the data or evidence for the need for these changes, and whereas no data indicators have been shared regarding the success of the changes, and whereas staff are planning additional significant changes for the 2025-2026 school year without sharing data or evidence for these changes, be it resolved that SEAC recommends to the board that staff share with SEAC and the public all research, data, and evidence staff used to base all implemented changes from the 2024-2025 school year and the proposed changes for the 2025-2026 school year, including but not limited to the Elementary Communication Cluster Program, 2023-2024 research, data, and evidence used in the decision to pilot Community Cluster Program, 2024-2025 research, data, and evidence used in the decision to reduce change in staffing, including but not limited to performance data of students in the program year over year, including 2024 fall data, number of students served year over year, decrease in students served in the 2025 fall program, and reasons for the decline. The primary enhanced learning class, research data and evidence used in the decision to close the primary enhanced learning program, including but not limited to number of primary age students for which an IPRC for giftedness was held, the number of primary age gifted students offered placement in the primary enhanced learning class, and the number of who declined the placement after it was offered. The reason the offer of the placement in the primary enhanced learning class was declined, the number of primary age students nominated for gifted screening by a teacher and the number screened, the number of primary age gifted students nominated for gifted screening by their parent, and the number screened. Secondary Regional Communications Program update. Research data and evidence used in the decision to change the secondary regional communication program, including but not limited to data used in the decision to restructure this program, data from the primary pilot that informed this decision, number of students affected, number of schools affected, change from contained classes to learning hubs, research, data, and evidence used in the decision to change the name and admit and demit criteria, including but not limited to changes to admit and demit criteria, current number of students served in each type of contained class, number of students that will be served in the new format, number of unidentified students currently not receiving placement due to a lack of diagnosis, number of unidentified students that will change placement due to these changes, number of students that will move from a contained class to mainstream due to these changes in criteria, change in staffing numbers, kindergarten transition learning class, research data and evidence used in the decision to change this program, current number of students in the program, outcomes for the program historically, data that shows outcomes will be the same or better.
Okay, this is kind of new to me on the this side of the street. So I think I need a discussion or seconder first. Can someone help me a little bit here?
Through you, Chair. I just see Nicole has her hand up.
Okay.
So I think if we can just Ray for one moment, if we can go to Nicole. Thank you.
I just would like to request the motion, what has been said to be emailed to me so that I can present it in the minutes.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So do we just have a discussion now? I see there's lots of hands raised.
So through you, Chair. Sorry, through you, Chair. You'll need someone to second the motion to put it on the floor. And then if I'm not mistaken, I believe you'll go to questions of clarification for the motion. And then, people they'll ask their questions. And then the person who put the motion forward will have, I think it's up to 5 minutes to speak in favor of the motion. And then if there's a seconder, that seconder can describe why they would, or why they were seconding or are seconding. And then the members of the committee also have the opportunity in the points of clarification to ask points of clarification about the motion. So first you have to go to seconder.
Okay. Can we have a seconder for the motion? I can't see anyone. Jazzy, seconding it? Yes. Okay, and Kevin McNaughton. Okay, so we have a seconder, Jazzy. So we go to points of clarification. Is that or discussion? I apologize. Go ahead, Lucas. Sorry,
thank you, Chair. No problem. Through you, Chair. So we had a working session on this, and I'm not sure if committee member Barb didn't have these points when she was there discussing it with all of us, but I don't recall there being this objection. I think staff were more than transparent and have given us the information that we needed to understand the decisions they made. They ran through it with us for hours on February 4th. So for that reason, I don't think I can support this. The consultation on February 4th was meant so that staff would have time to implement any solutions that we came up with, and the committee member and the member who brought this motion tonight was at that meeting, and I don't recall any of what was in her motion at that meeting. I also didn't receive a copy of her motion before tonight's meeting. So can Barb please clarify what changed between then and now? I'm not understanding the basis of the motion.
Well, there wasn't any data or research or evidence to support these changes brought to us, and I've had some time to think about what was brought to us since that meeting that we had.
Okay, through you, Chair, I'll yield my time to the other committee members. I don't have any further questions. I disagree respectfully. I think that staff brought us plenty of information, and they had data on a bunch of PowerPoint slides to show us differences in class sizes and resources and projected positive outcomes. So yeah, no additional questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, just going to read something in the chat here from Kevin McNaughton. I agree that parents would like to know why the change in direction as classroom teacher. I think some transparency is needed. I second the motion. Oh, sorry, I apologize. That was a second to the motion. Is there anyone else who wants to point of clarification or talk to the motion?
I have my hand up, but I'm
sorry, thank you.
I saw a raise hand was up. I mean, it keeps going up and then going up. So I think he's having some problem with his maybe sound. I'm not sure. Anyway, I agree with regarding the motion. I too will not agree. I do not agree with what Barb has put forward, and I was quite happy with the information that was presented at the last meeting, and I will not support the motion. Thank you.
Well, it's not that we're not happy with what's going on. We want more information.
Yeah, I'd like to. Sorry, could I comment? I don't know if I can put my hand up. So I agree. I think it was a good discussion, but there were questions asked at that meeting about, what are the outcomes from the pilot that was started, right? We're making all these changes. We haven't even seen results of a pilot for the communication problems program, and we're changing again. We were told that the reason that the numbers were smaller was that people were graduating out of that. I'd love to see that data. I'd like to understand that. Is that really truly like 30% of the people graduated last year out of the program? Because we have 30% less than we expected. There was a number of questions with regards to data and numbers, and continually, even last year when the changes were made, we asked for data. And I don't see it, and I don't understand how decisions can be made without having some data and some understanding of the programs and if they're working, if they're not working. We're about to close the kindergarten program, and I actually don't remember talking about that the last meeting, but we probably did and I missed it. How has that worked for the past however many years it's been implemented? What are the results that we're seeing, and what are the results we're going to have? It should we change the program? So we're just looking for. I'm sure you have this data and you have the explanations and the understanding of it. We're just asking that you share it with us. Yes, that's all. Okay, so we have Jeffrey Clark had his hand up next.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Actually, I have no idea what the motion was because my computer disconnected, and when I reconnected, it suddenly decided to restart. So I don't even know what the context of this discussion is. Unfortunately, so I can't really intervene or have any comment.
Point of order. May I, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. So through you, Chair. So Trustee Clark, the context of the motion is to, and I'll allow Barb to clarify through the Chair if I'm speaking incorrectly. It was quite a lengthy motion. I know that our reporter has asked for the written copy. I'm not sure if Barb's able to send that. If she can, maybe she can send you the written copy, Trustee Clark. But I believe the context is to, Barb, and please clarify if I'm wrong. You want to, for lack of a better word, vote down the changes that the board is bringing.
No,
correct?
No. We want
reiterate?
some data evidence and research to back up these proposed changes. That's what we want. We
Could
want
you-
more
could-
information. What is
Through
the
you, Chair, can you
evidence
read it
that
again?
these changes are going to benefit the students?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Can we have the motion read just one more time? It was quite lengthy.
Through you, Chair, I do think that Lynn has some a comment to make about the data collection. And just noting through you, Chair, again, that we have done asked for feedback from the comm community, which Lynn and her team are going through now, that help to guide these decisions. Go ahead, Lynn.
Through you, Chair. I was actually, I'm going to get to take notes this time because it was so long and it's not in front of me, and the list sounded rather cumbersome and might take 2 of my staff 6 months to produce. And is that the good use of our time? And so that was my concern, that it would become a hardship for other projects. But I until I could actually study what was being asked, I couldn't say which ones were easily produced and some might not be so easily produced.
Any other? We have Ray. Did you have actual questions? Or Mike was covering. So Ray, did your question have to do with the motion, or you?
No, it's not got to do with the motion.
Okay, so can we come back to you after this?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Lucas Ells.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, so I was just asking for clarity. Can we have the motion read again, please, before we vote on it?
Whereas the staff have made significant changes to special education services and classes in the 2024-2025 school year without sharing the data or evidence for the need for these changes, and whereas no data indicators have been shared regarding the success of these programs, and whereas staff are planning additional significant changes for the 2025-2026 school year without sharing data or evidence for these changes. Be it resolved that SEAC recommends to the board that staff share with SEAC and the public all research, data, and evidence staff used to base all the implemented changes from the 2024-2025 school year and the proposed changes for the 2025-2026 school year, including but not limited to for the elementary communication cluster programs, 2023-2024 research data and evidence used in the decision to pilot community cluster program, 2024-2025 research data and evidence used in the decision to reduce and change staffing, including but not limited to performance data of students in the program year over year, including 2024 fall data, number of students served year over year in the program, decrease in the number of students served in the 2024 fall program and reasons for the decline. Primary enhanced learning class, research data and evidence used in the decision to close the primary enhanced learning class, including but not limited to number of primary age students for which an IPRC for giftedness was held, the number of primary age gifted students offered placement in the primary enhanced learning class, the number who declined the offer of placement, the reason the offer of placement in the primary enhanced learning class was declined, the number of primary age students nominated for gifted screening by the teacher and the number screened, the number of primary age gifted students nominated for gifted screening by their parent and the number screened. Secondary regional communication program update, research data and evidence used in the decision to change the the secondary regional communication program, including but not limited to data used in the decision to restructure the program, data from the primary pilot that included the decision, number of students affected, number of schools affected, change from the contained class to learning hubs, research data and evidence used in the decision to change the name and admit and demit criteria, including but not limited to changes to admit and demit criteria, current number of students served in each type of contained class, number of students that will be served in the new format, number of unidentified students who currently not receiving placement due to a lack of diagnosis, number of unidentified students that will change placement due to these changes, number of students that will move from a contained class to a mainstream due to changes in the criteria, change in staffing numbers. Kindergarten transition language class program, research data and evidence used in the decision to change this program, current number of students in the program, outcomes for the program historically, data that shows outcomes will be the same or better. I'm surprised that none of this was taken into consideration when the decision was made to change these classes. Like, to me, this is something that the board should be collecting data on an ongoing basis.
Lucas?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So a couple things. So I think if we're not if I understand the motion correctly, you're asking Barb for staff to share to share the data that led to an informed decision. Now, yes. I believe they already did share that with us, so I can't support the part of your motion in the way it's worded where we say staff didn't show us anything, because it's not true. They did show us data. So what I would be supportive of, and if you're not comfortable with this, that's fine. Your motion can exist in its current format. But if I think what I would be supportive of is adding this motion or a motion to the motion action log, to the notice of motion for the next SEAC committee meeting. Let's send this written motion or a version of it to staff so that they can prepare. You know, they won't be able to respond to. There are like 14 data points in your response there that I don't think they'd be able to pull offhand. And I would change the wording so that instead of it saying, you know, staff didn't provide us with any of this information, that it simply read, can staff please provide the SEAC committee members with the information that led them to XYZ decision? Would that be amenable to you, through you, Chair?
Barb, did you want to respond?
Well, I would disagree that we were provided with data, research, and evidence for these changes.
Fair enough. Okay, through you, Chair, I don't have any other questions. But I do believe Dr. Hollingshead has her hand up.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I tried hard to catch all of the things that you were asking for. Some of the things I don't believe we collect, so would not be able to report. And I don't know how that impacts the motion when it comes back that we say we could answer these 20 questions, but we can't answer these 10. But for example, I don't think it's probably documented around the number of unidentified gifted not receiving services. I don't know that we document screening, like if a parent has brought the student in or recommended, I think it was said, and then were they screened. I don't know if we are documenting in a way that we could collect that information. Maybe it's in an OSR, and then we have to read through everybody's OSRs to find that information. So like some of the things in your list are not readily available for us to report on. And I would have to study your list carefully to know which ones were available for us to report on.
I'm not sure that that impacts whether you want to go ahead, Barb, or whether we.
Sorry.
Well, I can change it to a notice of motion, and we can work on some changes that maybe we can agree on.
Sorry, if I may, through you, Chair, I'd be willing to support that, and Barb, I'd also be willing to extend some of my time. I'd be happy to meet you virtually, or we can meet at CBO, pen and paper, and work on some new language, and then we can also connect with staff to see what a reasonable time frame might be for them to deliver, a report. And Dr. Hollingshead will be able to give us some context on data that is available or isn't available and why. Just spitballing here, but some data maybe doesn't exist because of something to do with the ministry, or does exist and we do have. So if you would be amenable to that, I would too.
If, just a question, if this were changed to just say, can staff provide us with the data that was used to make these decisions in some way or format, could we move forward with it? Is that like, all we're looking for here is how did you come about, or like, as a group how did you decide this was the right decision? And also in the decisions we've already made, what's happened, right? The decisions that were made last year, we still haven't had any feedback as to how the program's working, that kind of thing. So I don't know, Barb, if that's something, or do we want more specific about the questions?
Yeah, through you, Chair, if I could just answer that, as I shared, we did do parent, student, and educator data around the change to the communications clusters. Lynn and her team are just now looking at that data, to which we would provide a report back, right? Because we're in the middle of a pilot for that program, and committed to that. So that has been done, but happy for whatever the SEAC decides.
Do you want to take it back then, Barb, and work on it?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's one more hand up. Dorothy Petty has a hand up.
Sorry, go ahead, Dorothy.
Through you, Chair. I don't believe what Barb is requesting is unreasonable. I think all of her decisions should be guided by best practice. And data is what we look at to determine that. So if for whatever the reason, we don't have that, or a member of our body believes that the information provided isn't suffice, I don't believe it's unreasonable for us to go back to the drawing board and have a fulsome discussion regarding it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Any other hands up that I'm missing? So again, not clear on how this works. If it's going to turn into a notice of motion, what is the next step here? Go ahead, Lucas, if you know. You're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you. Through you, Chair. I would say if Barb would like to have this become a notice of motion, you could simply record this in our log as a notice of motion for the next SEAC committee meeting. And perhaps for the time being, because we don't have the write-up confirmed, Barb could simply list this as, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up our agenda to see what we have. Sorry, Superintendent Sakato, can you remind me what this is titled as a number in our agenda if you have it offhand?
Yeah, through you, Chair, is program changes 7.2.
So perhaps, again, through you, Chair, perhaps if Barb's amenable to it, we can record this as a notice of motion for a report seeking the data used to inform the decisions made in section 7.2 special, sorry, I just had it here, special education program changes 2025 to 2026. And if that's okay, Barb, my offer still stands to meet you at your convenience, so we can work on something with staff. Perhaps if Superintendent Sakato has some time, or Dr. Hollingshead, or to make sure we're getting all the data that we can possibly get.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. So at this point, the motion to receive this report. That'd be the next step.
Oh, so through you, Chair, I think Ray still had a question. I just want to honor that.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
yeah,
Ray.
Sorry, just Ray has had his hand up, but he pulled it down until after the motion situation. Just want to honor
Thank
Ray.
you for that. Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Sorry, my mic was kind of malfunctioning earlier. So my question, and I apologize if this was discussed in the February 4th meeting. I unfortunately missed that. So my question was with the ability-based placement. Now, we get a lot of parents coming to us in Autism Ontario, and I have earlier shared some of those cases with Claudine, whereby they are trying to grapple with how to go through the identification and the placement process. Now, since that name of IPRC is not changing, I was wondering the current process of the psychoeducational assessment that school board staff does, or sometimes parents kind of approach doctors and psychoeducational assessments done outside the school board, and then bring it to the school requesting let's say contained class placement, or in this case going forward learning hub placements, etc. So how would that process work, and specifically what's going to be the role of these psychoeducational assessments that are done currently, which primarily focus on identification and in terms of a diagnosis, and also a scale, for example, for ID or LD, as per the standardized questionnaires and so on and so forth. So how is that going to change to kind of blend with the ability-based placements that we are moving towards?
Thank you. And through you, Chair Ray, that is an excellent question. We will still be leaning heavily on psychoeducational assessments, as it gives us an outstanding portrait of the learner. And we will still honor exceptionalities and diagnoses in our board. But what it means is it won't limit the class that they're placed into. So our current naming structure, for example, we have a class that's called ASD, right? And so you must have autism to be in that, to placed into that class. But now if a student has a similar portrait, and is DD, but has a similar portrait to a student with ASD, they'd be able to be in a shared class where the learning focus would be on developing their skills and attributes necessary for progress towards greater levels of independence or school or whatever that might be. So we will still be leaning heavily on psychoeducational assessments. We will be honoring external psychoeducational assessments, and our internal psychologists will be looking at those and reviewing them for deeming students exceptional as well. So all of those IPRC process will change. What will be different is how we're placing students into congregated programs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Close this off. Okay, so I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the Special Education Program Changes 2025-26 report. I see Lucas
Aye.
and Dorothy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good. All right. Moving on to 7.3, the mental health strategy. I'll pass it over to you, Claudine.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair, I would like, and it is my pleasure to introduce Katie Green, who is the registered social worker and the PDSB's mental health lead. I am pleased to share that the PDSB's mental health strategy is amongst the best and the strongest in the province. So we wanted to have an opportunity, as requested, to share this with you this evening. So over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So as Claudine mentioned, tonight I will bring you the report about our work in mental health with a specific focus on students with disabilities and exceptionalities. Okay, next slide, thank you. The PDSB introduced its third mental health strategy in 2023. This strategy is in place from 2023 to 2026. Each year, the core mental health leadership committee, the Mental Health Steering Committee, and the 4 mental health advisory groups, students, staff, parents and caregivers, and community, meet regularly to review the current yearly plan and collaboratively create the following year's mental health action plan. PPM 169 was introduced in the summer of 2023 with mandatory implementation beginning in January of 2024. The PDSB is in full compliance with the 11 required areas of implementation as of June 2024. Much of this work was already occurring within the PDSB as we have worked in partnership with School Mental Health Ontario since 2017, ensuring that our mental health planning and implementation is fulsome and responsive. PDSB continues to advocate for additional funding for mental health services within the board and within the region of Peel, as the region remains underfunded compared to other provincial jurisdictions. In addition, school mental health and the ministry have not yet produced mental health literacy modules that are geared towards students accessing fully alternative curriculum. The PDSB continues to be a provincial leader in the work we are doing to ensure all students have access to mental health literacy learning and in culturally responsive and representative care. The managers of social work and psychology continue to seek additional training opportunities to enhance and diversify counseling and support practices for PDSB's registered mental health professionals. During clinical supervision, clinical managers continue to discuss the implementation and use of new learning when working with students. The managers communicate emerging and persistent needs to each other and to the coordinating principal of PSSP so that further training and implementation supports can be developed. Supporting mental health of students with autism and developmental disabilities, neurodiverse affirming practices for student support, adolescent-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and the role of communication in mental health are just a few examples of the enhanced training opportunities PSSP staff have undertaken so far during the 2024-2025 school year. It is important that we not wait for this training to be mandated. Where there is a need, we need to respond and ensure our clinical professionals are equipped to support the students and families of Peel. System professional learning across all departments has a focus of student well-being and affirming student identities. For example, the recent FASD ADHD professional learning focused on generating understanding of neurodiversity for the staff and how to help students develop their executive functioning skills while accommodating and modifying the learning environment to proactively reduce stress for all students with a specific focus on students with FASD and ADHD. Recent professional learning for central teams has highlighted the need to understand the multiple identities of students with disabilities and exceptionalities and how to center these identities and needs for learning. Where there is a universal commitment to student well-being and centering all aspects of student identities in system professional learning, we can equip school staff with additional proactive strategies to support stress reduction within the learning environment. There has been excellent uptake to this work both at the central and school level, with professional learning sessions serving as a way for educators to share the excellent work they are already doing and learning new strategies to enhance their practice. The mental health work of the PDSB is led by the Safety and Wellbeing Department, but has strong ties and shared leadership with several other central departments, such as special education, curriculum, and equity. We continue to collaborate with community service providers, such as Surrey Place, to co-create mental health literacy learning opportunities accessible to students on fully alternative curriculum. Through shared leadership and investment, special education and safety and well-being have been investigating alternative options for mental health and well-being learning, and as such have recently participated in a pilot of the Everyday Speech program, which is a video modeling social emotional learning and social communication learning program that is affirming and representative of a variety of students, including students with disabilities and exceptionalities. While the data for the 10-week pilot is still being analyzed, we anecdotally heard the program was effective in meeting the needs of several congregated classes in terms of mental health and well-being learning. Classroom staff were able to use the lessons in everyday speech to align with the learning outcomes of the mandatory mental health literacy modules, so the concepts were learned and reinforced in an accessible way. The PDSB's external website contains several resources directly related to supports for mental health and well-being. These can be found on the resources section of the peelschools.org website under mental health and well-being. Mental health services are also highlighted in the All Families emails. Additionally, the speech and language pathology team has assembled resources for parents and guardians on strategies to increase social communication and linked this to the special education and the resources section of the board's public-facing website. These tools can assist parents and guardians who are seeking these additional resources and connections. Through partnerships with community organizations, we have collaborated to present timely and relevant information to parents and caregivers. One example is the Community Service Providers panel that was recorded last year and is available on the external peelschools.org website. By maintaining partnerships, we can continue to make the best use of resources both within the school board and within the region. Finally, we're proud to share that the PDSB's suicide intervention, prevention, and postvention guidelines have undergone an update and were relaunched in September of 2024. This update included anti-oppressive approaches to suicide prevention and best practices for intervening with students with neurodiverse individuals experiencing thoughts of suicide. These guidelines were created in collaboration with community partners with specialization in youth suicide prevention, such as Every Mind, and partners with expertise in service to children and youth with autism and developmental disabilities, such as Surrey Place and Erin Oak Kids. Data is collected twice per year centrally. Each school reports back their compliance with the relevant areas of PPM 169 twice per year. We also compile data for reports to School Mental Health Ontario and the Ministry of Education several times per year. When there are new materials launched, such as the mental health literacy modules, we create implementation supports so that the materials are implemented with fidelity. Thank you, Chair, and at this time, I would be happy to answer any questions.
You'll notice a change in my background. I had to move. The kids are coming back in the house. So I apologize for that. Any questions? Looking for hands. I see Jeffrey Clark. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. I think I have a couple. I'm looking at the what we got in our email about this particular section of the agenda, and I'm just I have a couple questions. Are all the teachers getting this training, the mental health training? All the new, it looks like we've got like mental health for students with autism and developmental disabilities and cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy for adolescents. Are all of the teachers and staff being given this this training?
Thank you for your question, Jeffrey, and through you, Chair. The trainings that were highlighted, so the cognitive behavioral therapy training and some of the examples that I listed are provided to our professional support services personnel staff, clinical staff at the board. So that would include social work staff and psychology staff who are providing counseling services to students. But educators are provided with training around mental health literacy at all grade levels.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, so the specific training, listed in the report, this report is for this, the specialists, not just the general teachers?
So some of the examples of the trainings that I listed were provided to those specialized employee groups. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
through your chair, I can help to clarify that. So whenever there are students who are demonstrating stress behavior, we have concerns, they're invited to a student review meeting. And our PSSP staff who were trained with this area of expertise and specialty would sit at the student review meeting and be able to guide the learning and practice of both the principal, vice principal, ISSP teacher, and the classroom teacher, and share their expertise in that way, and then be able to provide any tiered level supports at that time as well. So although the teachers aren't directly getting this specific training, the PSSP staff sit at the meetings where they discuss students and the next steps around their supports.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Additionally, I'm wondering, are there mental health supports for, like right now, we're seeing two different areas of the world where there are ethnic groups that are being, pitted against each other. And I'm wondering, what type of supports do we have for, for like the Russian community, people from the Russian community, or people from the Palestinian community, or you know what I mean? Like, what type of supports do we have for them?
So through you, Chair, happy to answer that question. We do have many identity affirming supports in place. So we would again go through an SRM, and then through the clinical managers, they'd be able to ask for an identity affirming. So somebody who shares their cultural identity and understands the lived experiences and works through a trauma-informed way and provide support that way. So we don't limit supports to, oh, this social worker has this school. If students require identity affirming supports, then we work through the managers to make sure that the students have what they need from somebody who understands their lived experience.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Barb, you're up next. You're on mute.
Yeah. Regarding the suicide prevention initiative, how will you know if that's successful or not? Do you track the number of suicides at the board?
We do not track that kind of data, but we do ensure that all schools are reviewing the protocol with their staff members every year. And we seek feedback about the protocol from school staff who are implementing it. We also seek feedback from our professional support services personnel staff who are supporting students who have thoughts of suicide, and regularly review the guidelines to ensure and clarify information that is needed.
I'm just thinking of the information that the board had posted on the website regarding interventions for ADHD, which was just focus, which was not useful. So I'm just wondering, how are you going to know that these interventions are successful if you're not tracking anything?
Well, through you, Chair, first of all, that document has been removed as requested. Yeah. And we've done a significant amount of work, as we shared at our last meeting, around ADHD and improving the supports and websites. So we've done a significant amount of work in that area. And again, we do not always take quantitative data for every data set. Sometimes it's qualitative through interactions with principals, with community. All of our PSSP staff have regular meetings and meet with the mental health team around quantitative data that is not related to a student name or student specifics, but are the practices and the supports that are in place working. We work hard as a board to make sure that there are teachers in every location, every school location, that are SIP trained, so that in the event of suicidal ideations, that there'd be staff who are able to respond in an appropriate and caring manner. So we do a lot around making sure that we have not numbers, but certainly qualitative data around the supports that we have in place.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just add as well, just in terms of how we operate and work with the way that things are collected in terms of data. Sometimes we just look at also what are best practices in research itself. And so what is research broadly done, empirical research around best practice, and then we implement based on that. So we're not always tracking some of the more complex outcomes, such as this as an example. So I just also wanted to indicate that we're not always tracking every single thing. We're operating in best practice and using what broad empirical research tells us about the types of things that work over time and in particular situations and circumstances.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions? Just had a quick one. You're mentioning, which I thought was great, that you have different specialists that have lived experiences that you can bring in, which is fantastic. Do you have access to people with lived experiences with disabilities that you can bring in situations where you have a student with, say, a physical disability or something like that, that would actually understand sort of what they're going through?
Yes, through you staff, we do have many staff that work with us that have different types of disabilities and identifications and exceptionalities, yes.
Okay,
including on the PSSP team and on our resource team and on our special education team, yes.
Well, I was thinking specifically as you were talking about
yes,
PSP team.
yes, we do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for that report, and I will ask that we have a motion that Special Education Advisory Committee receives the mental health strategy report.
Yeah,
so
I'll move that.
Okay, and Lucas Alves, because you're right in front of me on the screen. Okay, moving on to 7. Oh, sorry, all in favor? Ayes. Aye. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 7.4, 2025 Count Me In Peel Student Census Consultation. Over to you, Claudine.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair, I am pleased to introduce Lynn again. She's had lots of time with us today, as well as Laura Naismith from the research department, who will work through their slide deck and hopes to have consultation from SEAC around the student census consultation. Lynn?
Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Scotto, and through you, Chair. As you may be aware, we are preparing for a student census and a full climate survey program for the next school year. The first phase of this initiative is the student census, which we plan to administer in the fall. Currently, we are in the process of developing surveys and consulting with various groups on the survey questions. And so at this time, I will turn it over to Research Coordinator, Dr. Laura Naismith, who will guide us through the consultation process. Thank you, Dr. Naismith.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We have a kind of short presentation to start with, just to kind of set the stage for what we're looking to discuss with the committee tonight. So I'll ask to move to the next slide, please. So just to give a brief overview of what a census is and what the purpose of conducting the student census within the Peel District School Board is. And so a census is intended to reach every student in the board and to be a tool to gather information about students' learning and schooling experiences, as well as their unique identities and backgrounds, to serve many purposes within the board. And among those purposes include better understanding student populations and school communities, identifying and eliminating barriers to student success, inclusion, and well-being, eliminating systemic racism and discrimination, and establishing effective programs. And while our goal is to reach every student in the board, that participation in the census survey is always a voluntary exercise, and the data that students and families share with us about their identities and their school experiences is confidential. Next slide, please. So to give a brief recap of the last student census iteration, which took place in April 2023, students and families completed the second student census, which included questions, again, about their identity and their school experiences. We had 4 different survey versions for different age groups. We had a kindergarten to grade 3 survey that was filled out by parents on behalf of their child. We had a grade 4 to 6 student survey and a grade 7 to 12 student survey that were filled out by students themselves. And then we had a accommodated survey for students in grades 4 to 12 who require support to be able to fill out the survey, or perhaps were not able to fill out the survey on their own, and that was primarily filled out by parents. We had all versions of the survey were available in translated versions, and we had responses received in 23 languages other than English. And next slide, please. So some of the broad themes from the 2023 Count Me and Peel census included questions about me, so this is questions about a student's identity, questions about their well-being, questions about their school and their experiences at school, about their relationships with staff, their school experiences. These are primarily around their experiences of safety or lack of safety, bullying, racism, discrimination, and questions about their learning. So the opportunities that they had to learn about a variety of people and groups, about human rights, and ways that they had to demonstrate their learning. And next slide, please. So based on the feedback that we've received from students, from schools, from staff, and from groups like we are consulting tonight, we are working to improve the census, both the format of the questions itself and also the process of administering the census, in order to make it a better experience for students and staff, to reduce the workload. We heard a lot about that the census was very long and required a lot of effort on the part of students and also staff time as well. So we're doing a number of things in order to improve our iteration for next time, which include consulting with different staff, student and community groups, reducing the number of questions and simplifying response options, making the language more accessible, reordering the questions so that we have the most important and salient questions first to facilitate administration, redesigning processes for communication with schools, and looking at where we can provide additional supports for students with special education needs and English language learners. Next slide, please. So our goals for today is we are going to be presenting you with a subset of questions on that were on the last student census, and we want to find out what you think about them and to get your feedback in order to help us make the questions better for the final survey. We're still in the process of finalizing the questions that will appear on the next student census. So for the questions that we've selected, we'd like to know, are the wording of the questions and the response options clear? Are there any response options that might be missing? How could the questions be improved to make them more relevant for students with special education needs and perhaps for families as well? And then after we look at all of the questions, we also would like to hear your thoughts about if there's anything else you think that we should ask about students' identities and school experiences, bearing in mind that we are trying to streamline the census process as much as possible. So going to proceed into the next slide. And I see your hand up, Trustee Alves. I'll respond in a moment. Just wanted to give an overview of some of the different ways that you have to provide feedback. Very happy to take your comments in the discussion tonight, either if you want to say them or if you want to type them in the chat. We've also put together a survey form if you would prefer to, maybe reflect on the questions and provide us feedback either, during the session tonight or later. We will leave that survey open for the next 2 weeks so that you can, kind of submit your feedback there as well. And I'd also like to say, while we've selected a subset of questions tonight, the full survey report from 2023 is available as a public document. So if you would like to look through that, and if you have comments or suggestions for other questions that we did not discuss tonight, we'd be very happy to receive that feedback as well. So before we proceed to the question, Trustee Alves, did you have something that you wanted to clarify?
Through you, Chair. I was looking at the questions before us, but I didn't see the why. So I was wondering if it's not too onerous for staff, and I don't expect staff to have this now, but I'm wondering if perhaps they can provide it to the members of the committee via email. But I'd like to know the reason behind why we ask some of these questions. And if staff can clarify, at what age group are we asking these questions?
So sorry, were there questions for the questions that we are sharing tonight, or for all of the questions?
That's correct. So, well, I think for all, sorry, to clarify through you, Chair, for all of the questions. So as an example, if we look at the 2023 report, if we can find out to which subset, what age categories are we asking, specific questions to? Like, did we ask, at my, for example, point 35, at my school, I have the opportunities to, then there's a drop-down menu. Why are we asking this question? What will this question, like, what's the purpose of the question? What data will it inform? And to what age group is this question being asked? All, some, if some, why not others? That's the data I'm curious about.
Okay, take that back. Thank you.
Sorry, and through you, Chair. Sorry. So my question is: are we good? Could staff let us know for the questions we're asking this year for all of them? Is that something we can have? I realize that if I'm just asking a question, I'm not dictating to staff. Just wondering if that would be something that staff could give us.
I mean, we're in the process of constructing the survey, so we have not finalized the census for the administration for next year at this time. But that's certainly something that we could look at for, before the census is administered.
Awesome. So that would be great. At some point before the census is administered, the Board of Trustees will be able to see that for all of the questions. Why are we asking this question and to what age? Thank you.
So,
and sorry, through you, Chair, you might want to just record that in the motion action log. I know that this committee operates a little different than our standard committees. If we can note that in the motion action log, that come back before, and that stay that in the motion action log, so that before the census is delivered, we have that opportunity. Thank you. And thank you, Steph. That's great.
Okay. There's also a question in the chat. Is based on responses from last survey, what was the feedback? What did the previous survey achieve?
So through you, Chair, we have reports that were shared publicly on the student census information. The data gets used by a variety of departments within the board to plan their strategies. We use the identity specific information, which is a key component of being able to produce the equity accountability report card, for example. So the census data gets used in multiple ways.
Thank you. And I see one more hand. Jessie, go ahead. She has disappeared. I know she's been having some trouble with internet, so.
Geez, sorry. That was me.
There you are.
That was on me, Jen.
Right, okay, sorry about that.
Started my day with my full-time job at 7:30, so I've been on the computer for almost 13 hours, so it's just been a day. But one of the questions is, do you consider yourself to be a person experiencing disability? And they ask about blind or low vision. And in the document, the link, it says very little or no vision, even if wearing glasses. I think that can be confusing because the definition of blind or low vision, when you go to the doctor, you go to sick kids, is different than very little or no vision. I think it should be framed around if the child needs assistance or assisted devices or support, because I think then that speaks to connecting with the parents and them saying, okay, should I tick this mark? Should I respond to this and say that my child has blind or low vision? I also think when you're asking children to answer that, like grade 4 and 5-year-olds, I know that we encourage them to advocate, but I think it's difficult because some children probably don't want to identify themselves as a disability, having a disability. So I guess I'm asking to have more consideration with that question. And the second part to my comment or question is how does the numbers or the results that we get from question 6 rack with parents and children disclosing their disability through the IPRC process and formally? Like, is this over or under what we get when they ask for support?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for those comments. Really appreciate if you have any specific suggestions for wording, we'd certainly take those around the definition for blind or low vision. Otherwise, we will definitely take that back and try to align it more closely with perhaps a clinical definition, something as you mentioned from SICK Kids. So I think that's really great feedback. So thank you very much. In terms of the alignment between students disclosing a disability on the census and what we see in IPRC. We've not done that comparison directly within our board, but there is some data that has come out of TDSB to show that actually they're reaching different populations in some cases. So there is some overlap, but it's not the degree of overlap that you necessarily would expect. So which suggests to us that we're able to reach different different groups. And we know that the exceptionality categories are somewhat limiting. And so this allows students to be able to share their identity in a way that feels more comfortable to them.
Mm-hmm. So when they sorry, I have a follow-up question, but when they share when they disclose, like I see 0.7% for blind low vision, I'm thinking like when they disclose, and then what happens? Do we, because it's a consensus, a census, sorry, I'm assuming we don't reach out to them, or do we reach out to them with?
We're looking with the census to gather system level data.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, Barb, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm wondering with the census data and the question regarding the students' disabilities, are you able to link the results with the disability or the exceptionality so that you know, oh, we're not meeting the needs of this specific exceptionality? Or this specific exceptionality seems to have these feelings?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, through you, Chair. So in my experience with this question, it really is a struggle to get good responses from students. If we talk about blind and low vision, we have a lot of students who indicated they had glasses and then tick the box. And so we're still working to improve the question so that we get better responses. And then as Dr. Naismith mentioned in TDSB, and I also saw it in Wire DSB, that there is a real disconnect between the exceptionalities that kids are formally identified with what kids are saying about themselves. And one of the questions that has come up with regards to that is, do parents always explain, or do the children always know what those exceptionalities mean in their own identification of like how they see themselves, or are they hesitant to disclose that on the census? So there's a lot of questions about why there's such a disconnect between what we know officially through the IPRC process and what students are saying in a census, and we're still trying to make sense of whether the problem is with the question or if there's something else going on.
So I think I saw in here a question asking about the accommodations. So if there's a disconnect between what the students know about their exceptionality and what they're answering, if you're answering that, asking them if they're getting their accommodations, they don't know what's on their IEP, they wouldn't know.
Could be.
Yeah, so again, as we were hoping to, kind of show some of these questions. I don't know if we can go back to the presentation slides, and maybe it would help to have a visual of the question itself as we're having this discussion. So if we can move to the next slide, and I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, which are the questions for consultation, if you want to follow along on the document, because I know it can be, there's a lot of text on the screen here. But this is the question 6 that we've been talking about. So do you consider yourself to be a person experiencing disabilities? And these are the options that we had on the last census. So I guess what we are hoping to, hear tonight, we've already heard a comment about, clarifying the description for blind or low vision. Are there other categories that are perhaps missing? Are there other definitions that could be improved? Are there other ways that you feel that students would be interested in sharing information about how they identify?
Well, I see language impairment here. Now, a student who speaks English as a second language might think that that's a language impairment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Is this the wording for all students from K to 12?
So for K to 3, again, their parents would be answering on their behalf. These would be the options for students in grades 4 and up.
Any other hands? I don't. Anybody have any comments, questions? I'm curious, mobility and physical disability. Can you describe to me the difference between those two?
I think when we envisioned the list, we had the sort of distinction to be made from a person who had a physical disability, but was able to move around their school and to be able to, kind of access, the different parts of their school in a different way than someone who would identify with a mobility disability, of that being the primary barrier for them is the access and being able to move around. But again, if this is one that we should look at and clarify, we can certainly, take that feedback back.
Yeah, I think a little clarification around there, because from my group, we from Easter Seals, I think that might be a little confusing for a lot of.
Okay.
I see Susan.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding that language impairment thing. Does it relate to, as it was pointed out earlier, maybe somebody who's coming from a different country speaking a different language? Or do you mean that? Or weakness in speaking English? Is that what you're aiming at getting? Like,
So we were aligning in this case with the Ministry of Education language impairment exceptionality category. So not with, students who would be English language learners or multiple language, have multiple languages.
Okay.
But again, maybe there's a clarification to be done there as well.
Yeah. So, like it could be connected to speech impairment, like stuttering. Is that what you are trying to connect?
So speech impairment we have listed as a separate option.
Yeah, it's a separate, so.
Yeah, through you, Chair, if I can, Trustee Benjamin. And a language impairment is as described by Laura, is a learning disorder characterized by an impairment in comprehension and or the use of verbal communication, either in written or orally. So it's it may be associated with neurological, psychological, or physical or sensory factors. So it is not, again, I understand why there might be some confusion on students' behalf, but it is an actual exceptionality as outlined in the ministry document, Special Education in Ontario.
Even parents would have a difficulty understanding that.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a good point. So
sorry, go ahead.
I'm wondering if we can, through you, Chair, have like hover down, you kind of hover and then there's maybe a definition that pops up or something.
Correct.
Like if something that would require a clarifying. So if you hover above that one, it would give you a kind of bigger definition, maybe.
We can look at that.
I'm also wondering if we could simplify it in that, do you know if you have an IEP? If you do you know what your exceptionality is? And then maybe on to this question kind of thing. So then you would have for that person, well, they are clear, they've been explained to whatever, they understand that. But people that maybe, I think that might just give us more information to the census, I guess.
Yes, I think so. We have the ability, because the census is confidential, but it's not anonymous, we do have the ability to match up the data that students provide with the data that we have in our student information system. So we can make that connection of if they have an IEP or they don't have an IEP, but that doesn't necessarily mean that reflects what the student knows about their, about that. So that point is taken. Thank you.
Sorry, Jessie, I had my mic off.
No, that's okay. Did you already address the more simpler plain language for kids that are in grades 4 and 5? Like, is it the same language that we see here for 4 and 5, but they just get the opportunity to fill it out?
So for this particular question, this was the same version was used for students in grades 4 and up.
But but for the other questions, there is a more simpler.
For some of the other questions, yes, there are different versions or a simplified set of response options.
Yeah, because I wonder if, like, even this question, I just think everything just needs to be the language needs to be less education jargon and very simple, because I mean, English is a second language to a lot of members of our community. It's not easy to follow along for me. I don't know about the rest of the members on the call, but a lot of the material always is very heavy, and it takes time to, like, you guys are in education, so it might be very easy for you to understand. But even the census, like, I completed it for both my children, and it took me a very long time. And it took me a very long time to, like, digest and really put thought into my answers. And I understand English, but I still feel troubled. So I can only imagine with the children and with the parents. So I would just, caution and urge you to really, I don't know, make it easy and simple to follow.
So another option that I have seen for this question is similar STEM. So do you consider yourself to be a person experiencing disability? And the options are yes, no, not sure. And then you have an option to, perhaps write in if you say yes, or you have a next question. If you say yes, you have a next question with this list of options. Do you think something like that would be more appropriate, or just looking at this, again, I'm hearing what you're saying in the context of the entire survey. Is there anything specific that you would suggest for this question?
To be honest, I don't have a solution. I'm just kind of stating the problem. But, like, I'm open to solutions. I just want to state that it is very different. It's not, honestly, I'm not trying to pick on this and say that it's difficult to follow. I just find in general, like, a lot of the content is very difficult to follow. But I mean, if you really want to get the right population and you really want the people to complete the census, with the parents that I've talked to on the field, it's lengthy, it's hard to understand. There's hesitation with filling it out. I think if it's easy, it's simple, it's plain English. And I think the hover is a great suggestion, but open to other ideas that you guys can come up with. What do other boards do with their census?
Other boards, they have long census documents similar to these ones. And so we, have done a scan of, what other school boards are producing and trying to take the best of what we see in other places, and also to really work closely with students and with staff groups and with community groups to be able to really identify what those necessary set of questions is. But the feedback that it's too long and it's too complicated is something that we've been hearing from all of those groups. So this is, one of the areas that we're really pushing to simplify for next time around.
Okay, I see Lucas, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just echoing committee member Jessie Gill's comments. I'm glad that staff are taking into consideration. Very much looking forward to seeing what the updated language will be, but I just really want to underscore that, I'm very much in support of committee member Jessie Gill's comment. I think, as simple as best, if we can keep it to a really low reading level, that would be great. This way, everyone that reads it can understand it. Thank you.
And I like the idea you had said where it's like, the same question, but yes, no, I don't know. And then follow it in, and then you break it down slower. Like, I have a problem with X, and then that leads into other things. So you kind of can funnel them in to where they're supposed to be or where they are. I don't know.
Yes, I understand, what you're saying.
That was a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so if we could maybe move to the next slide. So this is another, key question that we wanted your input on in terms of we're trying to understand the different barriers that students experience. And if we have with the, the purpose of having an understanding of barriers helps us to know where we can, work to remove some of those barriers. So this is a question that we had on the last census, asking students, have you experienced any of the following barriers at your school that limit your learning? And had a number of response options. We don't feel based on the written responses that the students entered in the other barrier box that we were really getting at the idea of barriers that limit students' learning. So for example, we heard feedback around, well, the Wi-Fi connection is bad in the school. And while, yes, I, appreciate that that is, can be an issue for students, that wasn't exactly what we were trying to get at in terms of, not having access to accommodations or, being discriminated based on your disability, kind of things like that. So we're trying to look at ways that we could ask this question to, to be more focused on the experiences of students who require supports in school or who, for which the school environment presents particular barriers. So in the appendix, there are a couple of different options. And so if you go to the next slide, one of our first, sorry, if we could move to the next slide, please. One of our first, kind of attempts in order to be able to understand the significance of these different barriers or the frequency with which they're experienced is to have a frequency scale attached to the different types of barriers that are included here. And so just, again, wanted to put this out to the committee. Are there ways that we could rephrase this question or different options that we could provide that could help us to get a sense of the kinds of barriers that exist for students with special education needs?
I'm going to start off because I don't see any hands yet. This format that we have in front of us, I'm not sure how well that's going to play out on like a Google Read or whatever you're using now for students who have it read to them. Not sure how easy that would be to access. And I don't know because I've never tried it with something like this, but have you actually attempted to do a program that reads this to a student so they can answer it independently?
Yes, so in the survey, so this is not reflective of what it would actually look like for students. In the survey platform that we used the last time around, it was fully compatible with Google Read and Write, and so they were able to respond to questions like this in a way that was accessible to them.
Okay, great.
Okay, can I ask a question? The first one, it is hard to move around my school. Now that is sort of a bit vague for me because a student may find, especially the younger ones who are the nervous type or not very confident, they will be afraid of moving around the school where there is a crowd. So, like, is it because of the physical disability or because they are not confident of themselves or, those kind of things. So it's a bit vague, like, I don't know what is the purpose of that question or what are you aiming at getting from that question?
Yeah, if I could respond to that I think in terms of what we were trying to get at is a sense of the accessibility of the building, of the physical building and the physical environment in a way that we could ask children that they would be able to understand and respond to that. But I do think that the way that it is worded here could lead to multiple interpretations.
Any other comments, thoughts on this? See any hands?
Hey.
Oh, yeah, Jazzy, go ahead. Sorry. See you.
So if it's hard to move around, that also is like, because when I think about blind low vision, bright yellow markers, like the ripples in the floor, like just very different contrasting colors, like that's where then the parent or child will then elect to say it is a barrier or not a barrier here. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even thinking beyond just the like kind of physical structure of the building then.
Yeah, honestly, I think you'd solve a lot of like questions or hesitations if you had like a hover or rove over.
Okay.
Right? Because if a parent was filling it out, they'd be like, hard to move is like physically, like if I'm in a wheelchair, or is it like bright contrasting colors? I think that can be applied to so many different disabilities. I think just having a hover over to say it's not like it could be a mental health thing, it could be a physical thing, it could just be like, I think hover overs would solve a lot of that, because I get it. You have a very difficult position to capture a lot. And I think Jen mentioned like an adaptive kind of test. Maybe that would be the best thing. Like I know, some tests can be adaptive. So if they click a specific question, then those type of further questions then kind of populate. Maybe an adaptive test or a hover over.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So I just saw a note up there that hover overs might be a problem for text to speech. So keep that in mind.
Right.
Lynn had mentioned that. Trustee Jeffries had his hand up. No, he's gone now. Trustee Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just kind of flagging a point of consideration. I had passed by our CBO office earlier today. We're just getting a bit late into the night, and I know we have staff that are still at CBO to monitor the meeting. So maybe if we could just like if there are specific questions that we can take offline, maybe we can do that. And if Chair, if you can, maybe just keep us on a timer just so we can move through the latter half a little quickly so that staff can get out of CBO.
Sure, good point. All right, do we have more?
Yeah, so in the document there were 9 questions that we chose to review with you tonight. You're welcome to take that to look through that document, to refer to the full board report, and to submit us feedback electronically. We'd be happy to take that either through the survey form, or if we can just go ahead to the very last slide in this presentation. That we have an email address as well. So if you'd like to just email us your comments, pdsbsurvey@plsb.com, we'd be happy to take them that way.
Okay, is everyone online okay with moving on? Anything and answering through the email or through the survey? Okay, thank you for your time here today. Appreciate it. And I guess we need to move for. Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the 2025 Count on Me and Peel Student Census Consultation Report? And I have Susan Benjamin and Lucas Elves. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, and moving on to communications for actions and receipt. So 8.1 is letter from the Ottawa CDSB to the Minister of Education regarding inadequate special education funding and educational assistance shortage. Can we take these two together? Motion them together? I believe we can do that. There, the letter from the Ottawa.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the letter from the Ottawa CDSB to school board SEAC chairs regarding special education funding in Ottawa. Do you want to talk to these at all?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to, they were sent to our board, and I think that across the province, school boards are trying to mobilize and share with the Minister of Education that the funding mechanism for special education is not sufficient, and we would encourage our SEAC to consider penning a letter, as our trustees have done and our director's office has done, to share the funding shortfalls that greatly impact our most exceptional learners, for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay. I will take that offline with the group and have that discussion to save time, if that's okay with everyone to do that. Okay, perfect. So can I have
sorry.
Sorry, we had an I apologize. Yep, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I was going to add, I would love to be a part of that discussion. I know my colleagues and I have written 3 letters. We wrote 1 letter to Minister Stephen Lecce when he was our Minister of Education, and then we had that upon Minister Todd Smith taking on the portfolio. We had that sent to him, and then he wasn't there for very long. And then we have Minister Dunlop there now. We have also written her a letter. I think our budget shortfall was $7 million that we reached into reserves through budget spending. I believe that was supported by just all the trustees. I know all the trustees that sit on SEAC definitely supported it. So yeah, just love to be a part of that conversation.
Okay, I'll loop you in then. Thank you. All right, may I have a motion then that we, the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the correspondence from the Ottawa CDSB SEAC as well, yes, both, I guess, from the Ottawa CDSB SEAC. Barb,
Yes.
that's you for one, and Trustee Ellis.
Number two.
Okay. All right, chair's request for written questions from the committee members. Do we have any written questions? I'm seeing shaking heads. Nope. Okay, great. Any reports from representatives on councils or associations? Seeing no hands. Okay. Question asked of and by committee members. Do you have any written questions? Nothing. Okay, moving on. Committee members' motions for consideration. Any motions for consideration?
Yeah, we have Barb's.
So we have Barb's.
Or no, sorry, excuse me. No, I apologize. That's for notice of motion. I apologize.
Okay. Then notice of motions and petitions. Are there any notices of motions or petitions? So we have Barb's there. We don't have to read that again or anything, right? We're good? No? Okay. No? Okay. Moving on to the motion action log.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Again, there was a paper copy of the data that was requested for the ONSIS report, and so that will be shared via email by my assistant tomorrow to answer that question. There was a question raised about what accommodations have been made for special education students to qualify for entry into the regional learning choice programs. I connected with my colleagues in the curriculum department, and they provided the following response. This measure was introduced as one of the many responses to the ministry directives of 2020 that called out the disproportionate outcomes of students that identify as Black, African, Afro-Caribbean, and/or Indigenous. This decision was reached through a process that involved consultation with the community, as well as students, staff, and trustees. We are currently not looking at making any changes to the application process at this time. In the last year, we have increased the number of seats in our regional learning choice programs, thereby allowing more students the opportunity to attend them. This increases the chance for all interested students to attend. So I believe, Jazzy, you were the one that asked that question. Just wondering if that meets the question that you asked.
Did we lose her again? You're on mute, Jazzy, if you're trying to talk. I see your hand. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm having like really bad difficulty unmuting, so I didn't know what to do and just put my hand up so that you guys knew that I wanted to speak, but then I couldn't unmute myself. Claudine, are you indicating that special education students don't have a auto enroll in the program? And so, sorry, why is that?
So the measure to allow students who identify as Black or Afro-Caribbean into automatically, if they qualify for the program, not go onto a wait list, was a part of our extensive work through the ministry review. And that decision was made in combination with the curriculum department through intensive collaboration with community. And they have not made any extensions past that initial commitment made to the community at that time. So they said that there's been no consideration from the department to change that at this time. That was the answer that they provided back to us.
Okay. I'm going to say that that's not a good answer. From an advocacy perspective, how do we then challenge that? I get that there hasn't been further considerations made, but then how do you then challenge that? I think I can speak on behalf of all of the advocacy groups around the table that if there's a child, I think that there has been disproportionalities with special needs children and families. And so I think if they do the test and they are successful, then they should also be auto-enrolled in the program. So how do we go about challenging that with the appropriate channels?
Sure. Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair. I can certainly bring that back to the Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction to see if she has further feedback to that, but I will now move over to Dr. Logan.
Oh, thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Spicotto. And really, I was just going to indicate that as well. It's something that we can definitely take back. Just to give a little bit more information in terms of understanding how that came to be, in terms of including that in the RCLP. It was also based on longstanding, also historical data that has been conducted around specific programs in not just obviously in the Peel District School Board, but it was also looking at enhanced programs that have happened historically across multiple school boards. So just wanted to give a little bit of understanding around where that came to be, that it wasn't necessarily Peel specific. Yes, the data is Peel specific, but it's also grounded in historic research that has been around for, I would say, 30 plus decades, that shows historically the ways in which Black and Indigenous students in particular continue to be and have been longstanding groups that have not been represented in enhanced programs historically. So I just wanted to clarify that so that you knew that it wasn't just about the Peel District School Board, but we'll definitely take that back for recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. No, I appreciate that. I don't dispute that historically that hasn't happened. But I also want to advocate that I think it's also happening with special needs children, and so I think that group should also be included in that. But I will leave it to you guys to kind of escalate and see through the appropriate channels.
Yeah, and through
Absolutely.
you, Chair, then I would like to leave it on the motion action log since we feel like it's not resolved. So with your approval, Chair, I'll leave it on the motion action log until I'm able to seek additional feedback from the Superintendent of Curriculum and the Associate Director of the Curriculum Department. Does that work, Chair?
Yes, sorry, asking Jesse. Just what would be the process
Let me reach out to her and I'll find out and I'll bring that back. I think she's joining us at our next meeting anyway, because I think she's providing some EQA updates at the next meeting as requested. So she'll be with us. So I'll allow her to kind of share what that process may look like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and through you, Chair, we have one deferred till March 2025. And again, I provided the annual accessibility plan update in my oral presentation today. The condensed version for feedback of the special education guide for families that SEAC requested has been completed. We did have, again, lots of copies for you because I know that some people prefer the copies to be able to read, but those that guide for families that was requested will be sent to you electronically, and we will be collecting feedback at the next meeting, but we wanted to give it to you a month in advance so we had lots of time. It's currently just in the draft form, and then once approved we will take it to our communications and media department to make it look Peel ready. So Jennifer, this last question on the motion action log was answered at the last meeting, but because you were not able to be present, we deferred it and had the response back on. So the question was asked around what are the processes and commitments of the purchasing department to ensure that all approved vendors meet AODA standards. So the response was provided by the purchasing manager, and then you asked for feedback, what the oversight was as a follow-up to your last question. And the oversight for accessibility in field trips and purchasing falls under the responsibility of the principal and the field superintendents. So as you know, there is a very comprehensive update to the field trip guidelines with some of the amendments that were written by a principal who was a strong advocate in the support of SEAC. Those amendments are now going to be added on to them, but it really is up to the principals and field superintendents to follow out those forms and make sure that they understand what students they serve and making sure that all the opportunities in field trips are accessible. And it's supported by, again, the appendix that was added to the excursion OP that was shared in the November presentation.
Okay, just so I understand correctly, the one that's in the whenever it was October, November minutes is not the final copy?
So whenever we make an amendment to an operating procedure, there's a process that it has to go through. So it's not just we say it's amended. So what was happened is that we made a suggested, it's not my department's operating procedure, it's curriculums, but there was a suggested amendment that was added on by Anna Tormino, who's one of the principals in Osman Masood's unit, in consultation with SEAC. And now she's following and through the process with curriculum to have the operating procedure amended. But there is a process that we have to follow through our governance officer. Yeah.
Part of that plan was to have a spot where teachers could put information on places that were accessible. Is that going to be part of the follow through on that procedure?
So whenever we have approved vendors, we have an approved vendor list. It's not just teachers that can add to the approved vendors list. There's a number of things that have to be considered before somebody is added on to the approved vendor list. So accessibility would be one of those considerations for sure, but it's not usually teachers that add to the approved vendor list. It's usually done internally through a process.
Sorry, I think I spoke wrong. What I'm saying is, so there's approved vendor list, which I'm hearing that purchasing is not taking responsibility for making sure that these places meet AODA requirements. They're leaving that up to teachers and superintendents, right? That's what I'm understanding.
So there was a consideration for that, but everything that's on the approved list, I'm not sure that meets accessibility standards. That would be dependent on the students that are going on that field trip for individual teachers and principals to make sure that the teachers who are going on the field trips have that level of accessibility. Does that make sense?
No.
So, okay.
No,
so the purchasing department is, yeah. So the purchasing department has committed to joining the accessibility committee. Like when we had this question that came up, we asked that department to come on to the accessibility working committee. So she is now on that part of the committee, and we are working with her. So I don't want to answer on her behalf, but it ultimately the responsibility lies on the principal and the teacher who is planning the trip to make sure that they're planning a trip that's accessible for all students that are going on it.
So I guess my next question would be, if that's the case, then are we giving them training on how to assess a location or a vendor for accessibility for their students? Because it's not a simple task.
No, not a simple task at all, but certainly the guidelines in the updated part of the excursion policy would certainly help towards that. But if you have further feedback, I'm sure that we could take that back before we recommend the amendment to make sure that we've done that.
Okay. And part of that recommendation was that not an approved vendor list, but there would be a list online that teachers could access where other teachers could say, hey, I used XYZ. It was great for students with ABC, right? That was part of the discussion of what would be part of that procedure. I wanted to understand, does that exist?
Yeah, we can take that back. That's not something that currently exists. Not probably informally exists through word of mouth, but not something that we formally captured recommendations on. So I can take that back and see how our department can maybe house that information around, or through Candace's department around accessible field trips.
I'd just like to make one other point. We should really be doing business with people that meet AODA requirements and not be doing business with people who don't, regardless of who's in our classroom.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that back to planning. Thank you.
All right.
That is the end of the motion action log. Thank you.
Okay. One other one got closed last month, I believe, around the EA absenteeisms. Did that get closed last?
Yes, it did. I don't have that with me right now, but it did get closed. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to review that because when I read the or when I watched the video, I don't think the questions were actually answered. So I'm gonna send the questions again that we need answered for that, and then maybe we can follow up together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I lost track of my page. I think we're at. Apologies, give me 1 second here.
Oh, sorry,
Through
Chair.
you,
I think
Chair,
you're
it's
at
on the
section
screen.
15.
It's on the screen.
Thank you. Excellent. We are at adjournment. Can I have somebody motion to adjourn? We have lots of people.
Aye.
Susan and Lucas, yes. And all in favor?
Aye.
Let's get those people at the board home.
Good night,
Thank you,
folks.
everyone, tonight. Appreciate it.